Whether built on a studio or in a remote location, movie sets are one of the most important aspects of the storytelling process. And while most are destroyed once a production has ended, some are simply abandoned, left behind in a timeless state, to become the ultimate film fan discovery, or succumb to the elements of nature. On May 2, 1974, filming began on the would-be summer blockbuster, Jaws. And much like the film's Mechanical Shark, which had multiple versions with varying purposes, so did the Orca, the iconic fishing boat and primary set for nearly half the film.
Show me the way to go home, home, home. I'm tired and I want to go to bed.
Orca 1, which was originally a lobster boat named Warlock, was purchased by the Jaws production team and given a makeover to become the fully operational boat as seen in the film. However, desiring the ability to have a ship that could be sunk again and again for multiple takes and angles, a fiberglass recreation based off a mold for the original Orca was built, called the Orca 2. And when production ended, the original and functional Orca 1 was sold to a special effects technician for fishing on the California coast. But upon the film's unforeseen success, it was bought back by Universal for a rumored 10 times the original amount.
Are you stupid or something?
Stupid is as stupid does, sir.
But the purchase was not in vain, as the Orca was then placed in the Jaws Tram Tour attraction at Universal Studios Hollywood, becoming a fan favorite sightseeing highlight. Unfortunately, sometime between 1991 and 1992, the Orca vanished from the tour.
I called up the head of the back lot. I said, "What happened to the Orca?" He said, "Well, it was just rotting there, so we took an axe and took a couple of chainsaws and we cut it up for timber and we shipped it out." And I went nuts. I feel very bad about all the things I said to that poor man who took my phone call.
The Orca 2, however, while initially planned to be dismantled, was spared when Jaws production boat wrangler Lynn Murphy bought the unwanted production vessel from Universal, and for quite some time, it sat on the shore of his private beach undisturbed. But as the significance and popularity of Jaws increased over the years, fans began to discover the second Orca's final resting place, trespassing onto the property to see, touch, and as what became most troublesome, tear off sections of the weather-stripped boat part by part and piece by piece.
Here's Johnny.
Tired of this behavior and for safety concerns, the owner decided to chop up what was left of the vessel into 1,000 1x1-inch pieces, which were then included in a limited DVD edition of Jaws. And while the original Orcas no longer exist, their memory will continue to live on.
The Fugitive.
Based off the 1960s television show of the same name, The Fugitive was released to critical acclaim in 1993, and to this day remains the only film based on a TV show to be nominated for Best Picture.
The Fugitive, Arnold Kopelson producer.
And while the crime action drama has many memorable action sequences, one in particular stands out, in which the wrongfully convicted Dr. Kimball, played by Harrison Ford, narrowly escapes a prison transport as it is struck and obliterated by an oncoming train. For the scene, the filmmakers opted to do the sequence for real, which took over 2 months of planning and cost $1 to $1.5 million, which was captured simultaneously on 13 separate cameras.
There were no rehearsals. There was no possibility of a second take.
And today, the remains of the famous set piece can still be found among the Great Smoky Mountains in North Carolina, virtually untouched for over 2 decades. And while nature has certainly taken its toll on the iconic and mangled set pieces, the crash site has become one of the sightseeing highlights of the local railroad excursion, and gives film fans a chance to visit not just an iconic filming location, but observe the end result of an astonishing example of practical effects. In March of 1993, with a modest budget of $22 million, and having just finished shooting Jurassic Park for Universal, filming began for what was at the time Steven Spielberg's most personal and mature film to date, in which he forwent any upfront salary or stake in the film's profits.
In telling the story of Oskar Schindler, I came to understand how one person, not an army, but one person, can make a difference.
Filmed in Krakow, Poland. While Schindler's List did utilize specific locations tied to the horrific events of the Holocaust, many nearby areas were used as substitutes out of respect or for aesthetic purposes, with only one major set being built from scratch for the film, the Plaszow concentration camp, which was based off original blueprints and constructed in an empty quarry less than half a mile away from the former camp's actual location.
All the pain that I suffered and my family went through and my crew and cast went through is nothing compared to one day in the life of any survivor or any one of the 6 million memories.
It was a hauntingly accurate recreation, down to the disturbing pathway of Jewish gravestones, with only minor differences such as the material of the fence posts and the proximity of Amon Gott's house. But once filming was completed, much of the site was left behind and abandoned, and over 2 decades later it remains, overgrown and overcome by nature. And while what lies in the quarry is strictly a film set and a piece of cinema history, its eerie realism is also a reminder of the absolute horrors of what once took place. In the late 1970s, Columbia Pictures beat out Paramount Pictures for the rights to produce a film adaptation of the Broadway musical Annie, which had originated as a 1920s comic strip.
She's Sarah Jessica Parker, star of Annie. What's your favorite thing in the whole world? Rainbows.
In response, Paramount decided to make a live-action musical out of a comic strip character which they already owned the rights, and would cast Mork and Mindy star Robin Williams as Popeye in his first big-screen feature film debut.
Why are you here?
I set a criminal free.
Why did you do that? That's against the law.
Well, he said he had to get out to see his sick mother, and he promised he'd be back today.
But rather than shoot on the studio backlot, Paramount decided to instead build the fictional village of Sweet Haven on the Mediterranean island of Malta, which took a crew of 165 workers 7 months to construct, of which a large percentage of the film's $20 million budget went towards creating.
Where's your secret? It ain't no secret, it was me dinghy in it's under the war.
But when production was completed in June of 1980, while it was supposed to have been demolished, the buildings were instead painted with a gray protective coating and left behind.
Maybe you swabs can fool your intelligence and sees that I'm asking you for an apology.
A short time later, despite then Prime Minister of Malta initially wanting the set destroyed, he was convinced by members of the Malta Film Facility to leave it standing, as a way to generate income as a tourist attraction. And despite the film's mixed reception and being considered a flop, what was once an abandoned film set has since evolved into a fully renovated theme park, which includes year-round activities for guests of all ages, while at the same time paying tribute to the dearly missed Robin Williams, as Popeye would be only the beginning of many future iconic characters and memorable performances. In March of 1976, history was in the making as Star Wars: A New Hope began principal photography in Tunisia.
Construction crews worked for 2 months to build the dwellings and towns of the exotic planet.
And when filming wrapped in April for the location that would become known as Tatooine, production left behind many set pieces and models, much of which was eradicated over the years by the desert's harsh weather conditions or buried beneath the sand dunes, and in some cases, salvaged and put to practical use by the locals.
Do you think they'll melt us down?
But in the 1990s, an archaeologist by the name of David West Reynolds, after being informed that no records had been kept of the original Star Wars Tunisian shooting locations, took it upon himself to discover the lost filming sites, as well as the few remaining artifacts.
We are simply passing through history. This is history.
And with his help, the location was once again utilized as Tatooine for the filming of the Star Wars prequels, several of which were identical reconstructions of sets from A New Hope, which have been commonly misidentified as originals. And once production wrapped, the sets were again abandoned, becoming a popular tourist destination for fans all around the world.
We used to lie out on the sand and let the sun dry us.
I don't like sand.
And while the only known currently existing sets from A New Hope were pre-existing locations dressed up for the film, it is possible that the desert sands will one day reveal any long-buried set pieces from the 1976 original.
Look, sir, droids.
Unfortunately, the harsh environment has already claimed 10% of the sets from The Phantom Menace, leading the Tunisian Tourism Ministry to put up funds to stay off the imminent burial. Though with the success of a 2012 fan preservation endeavor to renovate and preserve Luke's home, current efforts may gain further traction in the coming years. So what about you? If you could resurrect and visit any past film set, which would it be? As always, thank you guys and gals so much for watching. Be sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons, and I'll see you next time.